G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with the finale of The Outsiders plus First Moondog.
Look, we are stuck, as far as I'm concerned, we are stuck in the worst kind of juvenile politics, and this affects the national body politic. I mean, for goodness sake, we are close now to the situation that Ross Garnaut described in his book Dog Days, which came out about 15 months ago. And what was Ross warning about? Right? A collapse in the terms of trade, slowing wages growth, a situation where we would all have to get used to reduced living standards. Well, who else was talking about this week? The one grown-up who's departing the scene, Martin Parkinson. But what have we got now? We've got a treasurer who's saying, all I want you to do is go out there and spend for Christmas, at a time when there wouldn't be a parent in the country who, if they're not worried about their own job, they're certainly worried about the fragile and pretty ordinary labour market for young adult Australians.
Not a time to
now, you can be a 20-something and you can have a double degree, you can have a master's degree from one of the best universities in the country, but you are having a hard time negotiating a very different labour market. You go to regional Victoria and the stats for youth unemployment are shocking. Now, the result was seen in Victoria last weekend. That was the wake-up call. Now, well, you know, it was a whole range of issues, but at the heart of it was a sense that you had austerity budgets being imposed on people at a time when they're saying, you've got to be joking. We've got a flat economy here in Victoria. We need a boost to it. What's more, we want to know a sense of what is the future of, if you like, the post-manufacturing Victoria looking like. Now, if you go to the rest of the country, New South Wales is a standout. They've got growth there, but every other state is looking problematic. Now, if we don't have national leaders who can sensibly and competently address this, and I have to say that is true for Labor as well. Labor, it seems to me,
Labor is not coming up with a counter
I was just going to say, now Labor is, if Shorten is to be a credible alternative, and he has to use this, he has to use some of the political capital he's got to saying, there's plenty I'll oppose, but there are some issues they have to deal with. I happen to think he should be dealing on the higher education issues.
This would be in the national interest.
Absolutely, and he has to prove that. He cannot come to office the same way Abbott got there.
This, Ben, is the difficult political situation, isn't it? That you have a government, you know, in a fairly negative position, a government which attempted some budgetary adjustment this year, but didn't announce it. In fact, campaigned entirely in the opposite, and therefore didn't have the capital to see that through. And yet that situation hasn't gone away. That situation has deteriorated. The need for tough action is even greater. That's a tricky political position.
Well, it's a hard position that they've been put into. They've got much more debt than the Labor Party found when Howard came in, and the budget's in a tougher position as well. But they'll keep working at it because
they're spending $1 billion not finding MH370's dead black box in 3 oceans. It's hard to see why.
Ben Riley continues.
There's all sorts of reforms they've made. They'll continue to make them, but you know, you've still got Shorten. If you want to talk about trust, well, they came to an election talking about particular cuts and savings they were going to make to the budget that they've then gone on and decided to vote against. So I really don't think, and the line you used before, Bob, that he's the most successful opposition leader of all time, that's stunning. We have Tony Abbott knocked off 2 prime ministers.
No opposition leader this far in has those figures.
But Bob, from this point, he can't simply oppose, can he? I mean, as Maxine says, Bill Shorten's job here is to actually be positive.
Bill Shorten brought in the greatest legislation since the revolution of Martin Luther King about the disabled. He is not stained by his record. He was a good minister. He was a great, innovative person, and it's none of this plays. He's got the one slogan, fairness, that is greater than any they can come up with.
He may need more to say on the economy, I suspect, in coming months, but that sadly is all we have time for this morning. Our thanks to our outsiders who have been Maxine McHugh, fellow at University of Melbourne Graduate School of Education. She's the author of Class Act. Ben Riley, current president, Young Libs Australia, vice president of the International Young Democrat Union, and Bob Ellis, author, former speechwriter, blogger, author of The Ellis Laws, available now. It's 6.5 away from 10.
compatriots. Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist for The Guardian, First Dog on the Moon. It was another bad week for the government. They are going above and beyond to stuff this up. Tony tried to turn things around on Monday by resetting and rebooting, clearing the decks, sweeping out the cobwebs, blanching his almonds, although that didn't actually mean doing anything or changing anything. Perhaps he meant it the way Julia did when she turned into the real Julia and no one noticed. Of course, as soon as the PM had given his 43-minute press conference and the press gallery acted as if he was the only Prime Minister in history to ever have done so, the wheels fell straight off again. The highlight of the week had to be Textgate. The Federal Minister for Education has been asked to stop texting the Senator for Rugby League, Glenn Lazarus. It's so bad, he put out a press release. Who does that? Here at The Guide, we've gotten our hands on some of these texts, and I can tell you, listeners, when you hear what's in them, you'll be shocked. I know I was when I made them up. Here's the first one. Dear Senator Lazarus, or may I call you Glenn, or Glenny Poo. Dear Glenny Winnie, hoping we could have a quick chat about the uni-funding thing, perhaps over a refreshing Shirley Temple in the parliamentary disco. Lol, LOL, that's text speak for lying on a lilo. Or how about this one? Dear Glenn, I always enjoyed your sporty contribution to league ball. I'm also an enormous sporting enthusiast. However, I can still get quite puffed after a vigorous round of quoits. I understand what it's like to give your all out on the paddock, taking one for the team. Please, please, please let me come over so we can talk about hacking the living crap out of the university sector. Oh, I'm just kidding. These reforms are well overdue. Please, Glenn, please. LOL, love it or leave it. And here's another. Glenn, you big silly, call me. Glenn, Glenn. Glenn, call me Glenn. Glenn, call me. It's Christopher. Or perhaps this one. It's 4 a.m. I can't sleep because I'm thinking about university reform, Glenn. What are you doing, Glenn? Glenn, Glenn. Can I come over, Glenn? We need to talk about how together we will create a solid educational foundation for Australia's children, Glenn. Glenn. And then it really started to get out of hand. Okay, Glenn, I'll stop texting you now because I lost my phone down a well and I can no longer send you any more texts as I lost my phone. Now that was shortly followed by down a well. And that was followed by Dear Glenn, this is your mother. I am trapped down a well and I am using this phone I found to call you. Please call me back on this number and speak to me, or at least to whoever answers the phone, because it will be me and not the education minister. I don't even know who that is. Lol, warm regards, your mother. And finally, here's another text from the education minister, but this time it's to the PM himself. Hey, Tone, big Tone, Tonester. I almost got the union reforms through PUP, so don't crack it in the house just yet, and don't talk to Karl Stefanovich. Lol. To which the Prime Minister replied, Don't text me, bro. Lol, Piney, WTF, OMG, barbecue, sick, ruffle now. The BK with eyes is a totes massive loser. What evs, YOLO, YBYA, YBIA. And just to translate that for you listeners, the Prime Minister was saying, please do not send me any nude pictures. I'm laughing out loud. Christopher, what the heck? Oh my goodness. Barbecue, sick. I'm rolling upon the floor with laughter from my arse. The brick with eyes is an enormous failure, so there you have it. You only live once. You bet you are, you bet I am. Thank goodness the adults are in charge. Thanks for listening, all you lifters, all you leaners. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, proudly brought to you by the First Dog on the Moon Institute.
Well, there you have it. Tony Abbott is going down the gurgle hole. The Australian is writing about how he has not long left in his prime muppetship. His cheer squad are deserting him. And didn't you love the way Bob Ellis, with his gravelly voice, just kept coming in there and shooting down the right-wing ideologue? Bob Ellis, of course, has a bit of form with not liking Tony Abbott. Once upon a time, Bob Ellis wrote a book detailing how once upon a time, when Tony Abbott and Peter Costello were attending Sydney University, they had girlfriends. And Tony Abbott was a Labor voter because he was a Catholic, and it was traditional in Australia that Catholics vote Labor. And Peter Costello and his girlfriend decided that to get Tony Abbott to come to a Young Liberal Party Christmas event function, whatever it was. She, Peter Costello's girlfriend, would invite Tony Abbott along, and Peter Costello could accompany Tony Abbott's girlfriend. And they went to the Christmas party, and the upshot of the Christmas party was that Tony Abbott joined the Young Liberal Party and married Peter Costello's girlfriend, which both Abbott and Costello, working as a comedy team, sought to get a Supreme Court injunction to have the book pulped, and it cost Bob Ellis a lot of money, and I still don't think he likes Tony Abbott. I don't think anybody ever came up with any suggestion that there was too much wrong with the chronology of the events. I think it was just some of the implications that Bob Ellis had drawn in between the lines, which was objectionable. But on the other hand, as Justice Einfeld said, in all his years as a Supreme Court Justice in New South Wales, he considered a lot of slander, libel and defamation cases, and he found that 90% of successful litigants emerged from the proceedings wishing that they had never initiated the proceedings, because even if you won, it took such an enormous amount of time and it cost such an enormous amount of money, and it generated such an enormous amount of publicity for whatever event was attempting to be hushed up by the lawsuit, that it was counterproductive. It dragged things on, and it meant that somebody like me, for example, is still talking about the Abbott and Costello wife-swapping incident 20-something years after the book was banned. Maybe only 15 years after the book was banned. Whereas if there'd never been the lawsuit, I probably wouldn't have known about it, because, you know, back then who was paying attention to the internecine incestuousness of Liberal Party breeding programs? However, there was a pretty good outsiders. Wasn't a bad first dog on the moon. I've been personally absolutely delighted by the weather we've been having in Australia lately. Ever since the night when Brisbane and southeast Queensland got a 2 supercell thunderstorm lashing that apparently did closer to $170 million worth of damage than to $100 million worth. From about Adelaide to Brisbane, down through Sydney and Melbourne and all up and down the seaboard and across the coal mining and the irrigation areas and the inland cities, there have been the most amazing thunderstorms all last week. And because, you know, a week ago my soil moisture profile gauge had a spider living in it because there was no liquid water. Well, yeah, everybody else has been getting hammered. VB Ed over in Western Australia, he had a personal lightning strike on his business premises which took out his coal-fired air conditioner. There have been hailstones the size of cricket balls. The state emergency services have been flat out. Lots of people have lost power for varying amounts of times. And I've had 2 days where I've had a bit over an inch of rain delivered gently in 2 separate airdrops on those days, and a couple of other days where I've had half an inch, and quite a few days of cool, cloudy weather. And at night times, there's been an enormous spectacle of lightning on the horizon, every horizon, all the way around, the whole shitbox and shooting match. So I'm left with nothing but a very great faith in the creator of the universe's ability to use sniper skills on the micrometeorology controls. I'm getting gently rained on, as I requested in my rain dances, and all of the people who either didn't know how to rain dance or they voted for somebody other than the Greens, they are getting the shit beaten out of them by the storms cooked up by the world record ocean surface temperatures, which are pumping more moisture into the air. And that's what's apparently derailed the forecast El Nino drought. Isn't it marvellous? The weather gods hate Tony Abbott. They don't seem to dislike me nearly as passionately. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. And postscriptum, that does not mean that I've got God on my side. It means I'm trying to be on God's side. Ciao.